Hello everyone, we are Sergio Cárdenas Aroca, Juan David Rojas Orozco, and Andrea Silva Rojas. Today we will present our research project, Advanced English Learners' Attitudes Toward Nest and Non-Nest, Influences of Native Speakerism at an English Language Academy in Florencia, Caquetá, Colombia. First of all, let's explore the problem behind this research. The global expansion of English has impacted foreign languages teaching policies in non-Anglophone countries, including Colombia. Here, English is a compulsory subject from preschool to university. However, this has raised questions about who should teach it. To address the growing demand for English teachers, the Colombian government has brought in native English-speaking teachers, NESTs, through programs like the English Teaching Fellowship Program by the Ministry of Education. By 2010, over 1,400 nests were recruited, not just from native English-speaking countries, but also from nations like Serbia and Ghana. Private institutions like the ANS, Academia Nacional de Sistemas, in Florencia, Caquetá, had employed nests since 2016 to enhance English learning. However, this trend reflects the ideology of native speakerism, the belief that nests are superior teachers due to their mother tongue. This perception influences students' attitudes and can perpetuate biases against non-native English-speaking teachers, non-nest, impacting teaching effectiveness, classroom dynamics, and learning outcomes. In our specific context of Florencia Caquetá, the influence of this ideology on English language academies is a significant subject. A research project aimed to shed light on this phenomenon by investigating the influence of native speakerism on advanced English learners' attitudes toward both nests and non-nests in a Colombian setting. We believe that a critical understanding of these perceptions is essential to foster more inclusive and effective bilingual learning environments.
Our study was driven by a central research question, which guided our entire investigation. The research question is, how does the native speakerism ideology influence advanced English learners' attitudes towards native English-speaking teachers, NEST, and non-native English-speaking teachers, non-NEST, over their English learning processes at an English language academy in Florencia, Caquetá? To address this complex question, we established one general objective and three specific objectives. Our general objective was to document how native speakerism ideology influences advanced English learners' attitudes towards native English-speaking teachers, NEST, and non-native English-speaking teachers, non-NEST, in their English learning processes at an English language academy in Florencia, Caquetá. And our specific objectives were, first, to identify advanced English learners' attitudes towards native English-speaking teachers and non-native English-speaking teachers. Second, to analyze how the ideology of native speakerism influences the advanced English learners' language learning processes with NEST and non-NEST. And third, to determine the impact of the native speakerism ideology on advanced English learners' perceptions of the effectiveness and credibility of the NEST and non-NEST.
Our research is grounded in a robust theoretical framework that explores four main concepts. At its core, we explore native speakerism, an ideology that, as Holiday 2006 explains, it positions those perceived as native speakers as superior linguistically, culturally, and pedagogically, in contrast to those perceived as non-native speakers. According to Samuel, this ideology is widespread and affects teacher hiring and evaluation practices globally. From a sociocultural perspective, it privileges Western institutions and the native speakers' representatives in discussions about global English language teaching and who the ideal teachers are. These ideas are supported by Kisowiat and Lowell. There are also indications of underlying employment discrimination based on perceived non-native speakers' status as expressed by Houghton and Bouchard. Another important aspect was the dichotomy between nest and non-nest that classifies English educators as those who speak English as the first language and those who had learning. However, this classification oversimplifies complex realities. The concept of nativeness carries privilege and power dynamics historically associating native English speakers with linguistic authority and teaching superiority. Rahanan Yusad and Altayan Gosgoskur claim that determining who qualifies as a native speaker is complicated, influenced by sociopolitical dimensions such as race, ethnicity, and nationality. Deconstructing this dichotomy is essential for creating a more inclusive and equitable approach to English language teaching.
Another key concept was that language attitudes are defined as evaluative reactions toward language, according to Dragojevic. These evaluative reactions are evidenced in the beliefs, feelings, and predispositions people hold toward specific languages or dialects and their speakers, according to Atalmonova. These attitudes can be positive, negative, or neutral, and play a crucial role in shaping linguistic behaviors, including language choice, language learning, and language policy, according to Huguet and Jurda.
And finally, students' attitudes toward nest and non-nest are shaped by their beliefs, experiences, and cultural contexts. Attitudes, although abstract and difficult to measure, influence how learners perceive language varieties and their users. Some students associate nest with authentic pronunciation and global recognition, while others appreciate no-nest for their effective teaching strategies and shared learning experiences. Research such as Banzak and Funk 2020, Funk 2019, Alonso Herrera and Herrerarte 2019 shows that preferences vary. Nests are often favored for oral skills, while no-nests are valued for grammar instruction. Overall, understanding these attitudes is vital to promoting inclusive language education that values the diverse strengths in both native and non-native teachers.
Building on our theoretical foundation, let's discuss our methodology. Our research approached reality as a phenomenon from a pedagogical dimension, guided by the bilingualism axis of our master's program proposed by Araque and Rodriguez. This axis adopts a critical approach to communities immersed in bilingual contexts, from the sociocultural and linguistic characteristics of a human group. To achieve this, we use qualitative research. This naturalistic and systematic approach is ideal for identifying the problem, collecting, analyzing, explaining, evaluating, and interpreting data, according to NASA Jeep 2020. It allowed us to gather the participants' experiences, perceptions, and behaviors, answering open-ended questions such as how and why. TENI 2022.
In addition to the qualitative approach, we employed an analytical observational research design. This allowed us to draw logical empirical conclusions by examining the behaviors, habits, and reactions of our sample.
And a fundamental pillar of our design was the case study method proposed by Thomas. This method enables us to deeply investigate a particular case, focusing on a complex phenomenon within its natural setting, as proposed by Crescent and Poth. We decided to focus on Florencia Caquetá, a region often overlooked in academic research, to document how native speakerism influences students' attitudes in this unique context with a specific sociolinguistic characteristics. Using an instrumental case study was appropriate as the case served as a tool to shed light on a broader issue, as Mills et al. Discussed.
The participants were 21 advanced English students from a C1 level, taking courses at the Academia Nacional de Sistemas, ANS, in Florencia Caquetá during the first academic term of 2025.
A key criterion for their inclusion was having received instruction for both types of teachers, native and non-natives. Most had been studying at the institution for at least 6 months, which gave them an informed and reflective perspective on their attitudes. Their ages ranged from 12 to 32 years old, with a notable concentration between 16 and 17.
The selection was conducted using non-probability sampling, Cohen et al. 2018, especially convenience sampling due to accessibility, and voluntary sampling. Participants freely choose to participate. Institutional permission and informed consent were obtained from parents, as many participants were underage, and the students themselves. We guaranteed participant confidentiality and anonymity by using pseudonyms and gender-neutral pronouns.
We used two main instruments to collect data. First, a verbal guise test of VGT, which is a modified version of a classic linguistic research tool proposed by Dragojevic and Goldley Son. Essentially, participants listen to short audio recordings of different speakers and respond to questions about their perceptions of their speakers.
The verbal guise test enables the collection of authentic and subconscious perceptions, unlike direct surveys. In our VGT, 3 teachers participated to provide audio clips, allowing for natural conversation in their varieties of English.
Our VGT included micro-teachings of no more than 3 minutes from 3 different speakers. We selected speakers based on Cratchit's 3 circles model and Colombian language policy. One next from the inner circle from the United States, one next from a non-Anglophone country, Italy, and one next from a non-Anglophone country, Colombia. Participants answer 8 open-ended questions about different English teachers without knowing that the goal was to compare nests and non-nests. They were only told they would be comparing teachers.
The second instrument was a focus group. According to Frey and Simon Waterfield, we organized 2 groups with 5 main questions each. This technique encouraged an environment where students could share their thoughts and discuss their experiences.
It also helped uncover socially constructed biases around native speakerism, offering insights into the participants' collective mindset. Although we had prepared questions, the semi-structured format allowed us to explore emerging topics.
All instruments were administered in person by researchers and recorded with consent. To ensure participant comfort, they were allowed to respond in either Spanish or English, with Spanish being the primary language, especially for complex discussions and consent, given their preference for using their L1 in these cases.
To analyze the qualitative data from the verbal guise test and focus groups, we used an open coding process as guided by MacLeod. This involved transcribing the data, conducting an initial reading and writing memos.
Then, we systematically label emerging ideas, group them into codes, identify relationships among them, and organize them into general categories and subcategories. This inductive process allowed for a comprehensive understanding of the students' language attitudes and educational practices towards nest and non-nest.
Since the responses were mainly in Spanish and the thesis is written in English, we translated all the excerpts included in the document. We used spreadsheet software to organize the information and color coding to identify the recurrence and significance of the themes, guided by Brigham 2023.
Now let's delve into the findings derived from our data. Regarding our first specific objective, identifying attitudes, the verbal guise test revealed a nuanced interplay. First, the American speaker embodying the native ideal was highly valued for his native-like fluency and cultural authenticity, which learners associated with an ideal teacher. Many learners preferred him, reflecting a native speakerism bias where native speech is equal to teaching excellence. However, students also critique his rapid delivery and limited interactivity. highlighting that native status alone does not guarantee engagement or effective teaching. This duality shows an admiration for native qualities, but a demand for effective teaching. Second, the Italian speaker represented the face of nativeness, challenged the native ideal. Learners preferred him for his pedagogical clarity, lesson structure, and appropriate pace, suggesting a willingness to value competence over nativeness. Despite some critiques of a monotonous tone, this attitude indicates a partial shift away from native speakerism, acknowledging the balanced strengths of a non-native speaker. Third, the Colombian speaker, a familiar voice, was appreciated for his empathy and support for beginners. However, biases limited his perceived role for advanced learners, as some students felt his style was more suited for foundational stages or beginner stages. Overall, these findings underline that while native speakerism still plays a role, advanced students um, evaluate teachers based on multiple factors beyond just accent, including pedagogical clarity, lesson structure, pace, and motivational ability.
Moving to our second objective, analyzing the influence of native speakerism on learning processes, the focus group data revealed key categories. First, linguistic mastery, navigating the expertise spectrum. Students often perceived nest speech as fluent and naturally flowing, yet there was a recognized need for exposure to diverse accents, moving beyond a singular native view of English. Second, safe spaces, developing trust and rapport in the classroom. Interestingly, having fluent and spontaneous teachers typically associated with nests didn't allow lead to greater ease or assurance for advanced students. Instead, students perceived greater empathy and understanding from no-nest regarding learners' struggles, which they found fundamental for building trust and confidence. Concerns arose when Nest spoke too quickly, used too much informal language, or assumed prior knowledge, which could lead to frustration and anxiety. This highlights that no-nest pedagogically oriented approach resonates deeply with learners. And finally, more than just speaking English, valuing pedagogical skills. Our findings strongly emphasized that being a native speaker doesn't automatically translate into superior pedagogical skill. Learners acknowledge the solid grammatical foundations they received from no-nest, recognizing an advantage in explicit grammar instruction. This dichotomy reveals that advanced learners aim to complement the strengths of both types of teachers to enhance their learning.
Finally, for our third objective, determining the impact of native speakerism on perceptions of the effectiveness and credibility of teachers, the findings were insightful. We identified three main categories shaping these perceptions. First, foundation first. Students perceived numbness as more suitable for the initial stages of language learning due to their understanding of beginners' difficulties and their ability to use the learner's L1 as a support tool. This highlights numbness pedagogical strengths in fostering empathetic and culturally responsive classrooms, crucial for early and intermediate stages. Second, fluency by authenticity. For advanced levels, students value NETs for developing fluency and authentic language use, specifically the fluency, naturalness, and exposure to diverse native accents. They sought a demanding instruction that would push their boundaries. This appreciation must be contextualized within what could be termed as the relativization of native speakerism, meaning that they had a sequential learning preferences. This sequential evaluation suggests a pedagogical progression in which the role and perceived effectiveness of both nets and non-nets shift depending on the learner's stage. And lastly, pedagogical knowledge as non-negotiable. Despite the influence of native speakerism, advanced students consistently emphasize that pedagogical competence is fundamental in any teacher, whether native or non-native. They value empathy, patience, engagement, motivation, and class dynamics above all. This reveals a nuanced perception from students. While influenced by the ideology, their views on effectiveness and credibility were not entirely determined by native status, but heavily by teaching quality. This highlights a growing awareness among advanced English learners about the complementary roles of both types of teachers.
In conclusion, our study successfully documented how native speakerism influences the attitudes and learning experiences of advanced English learners in Florencia Caquetá. First, we found a nuanced interplay. While learners admire Nest fluency, they critique their delivery. They prefer non-Nest for pedagogical clarity and value the Colombian non-Nest empathy for beginners, although biases limited their role for advanced levels. Second, this clearly challenges the native speakerism ideology by highlighting the significant pedagogical and cultural strengths of non-nests, disrupting traditional views and underscoring the vital role of non-nest in fostering inclusive education in Caquetá's unique setting. And third, effective teaching, not just the native status, draw perceptions of credibility, with non-nests earning significant respect. In the specific context of Caquetá, with limited exposure to nests, non-nests are essential.
Thank you for your attention. We are now ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Policy
Thank you.
development.